The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
All right.
The up close and personal lapel mic wine pour.
Welcome to the Wireless Winemakers podcast.
Well, we've cut the ties, we've cut the cables. We're sitting here in the Rocks district of Milton Freewater, overlooking
Getting stoned.
So stoned. So many rocks. So stoned.
Well, and you're drinking good breakfast wine. So the 2023 Southern White Viognier Roussanne Marsanne takes the toothpaste away.
And we're looking out the window.
So the voice that you heard,
Oh yeah.
Sean Boyd of Rotie Cellars. We're sitting here in his tasting room, overlooking his vineyard and the hills of the southern edge of Walla Walla Valley, basically? Is that where
Yep.
we're... Right?
Yeah, Walla Walla AVA makes up basically this big basin that we're sitting in. We have a tasting room that's basically a fishbowl, all windows, and you can see the whole basin. So Walla Walla's AVA, basically you fill this basin up to 2,000 feet, and that is the Walla Walla AVA. And then a sub-AVA of the Walla Walla is the Rocks District of Milton Freewater, where basically the alluvial fan off of the mouth of the north and the south fork of the Walla Walla River. So that's where we're sitting.
And the thing that, and we'll be talking about this all week, we're here on location for Hospice du Rhone. Me and Brian, we brought James along.
Hi, James.
Hi, James. The Rocks is not just a clever name, right? It's up to 400 feet of rivers, rock.
Yeah.
That is the soil out here.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different periods geologically that are interesting. You have these huge basalt flows 15 million years ago, which is relatively recent geologically. Then you had these huge ice dams that would break in ancestral Lake Missoula. And so 60,000 years ago, these ice dams would form, during periods of glaciation. Ice dams would form, water would back up, and then they would break. And so there's about 60 different episodes where we're at about 850 feet in elevation, and the top of the blues that we're looking to our east are at 6,500 feet, and we would be buried by 2,500 feet of water during these floods. So they're biblical. And so they realized during the advent of satellite imagery that what looked like basically a wave going on a beach and seeing how it drains, that's exactly what it looked like, which is the Palouse. So they figured out, wow, there must have been so much water that flushed through there. So all the soil here is very exotic, and they call it exotics because it's basically all the soil between Montana and then going through Idaho, going into Washington, and then flush down here. And then we're looking to the west, and that's the Wallula Gap. It's basically two huge basalt cliffs that the Columbia River goes through. It's kind of that.
Oh, yeah. I drove past that as I was coming out of Pasco yesterday.
Yeah. So all the water rushed there. It couldn't get through it fast enough, so it just back flushed into this basin. And so this basin just deposited all this sediment. And so I'm getting to the reason why the rocks are here, but it takes just a little bit longer.
No, I love it. You went to school for geology.
Yeah,
right?
I was a geologist by trade.
Yeah. So this is perfect.
Yeah, I was an oil and gas geologist in a previous life with porphyry deposit when gold went below $300 an ounce, and I got canned. And so there's a missing segment of my age, porphyry deposit guys, gold, copper. So you have young guys and older guys because it wasn't economically viable for gold and copper and precious metals. But anyway, So, I mean, the reason why the First Nations would have loved this place is just basically this range. So everybody thinks of what Seattle as, rain, and Washington State probably is rain, but you got the Cascades, and you have a rain cloud effect on the west side of the Cascades. Hits the Cascades, all the rain falls. Then you have the Back Arc Basin, which is like Bend and say Wenatchee, all the stone fruits, a lot drier. Then you go through Yakima, which is 4 or 5 inches of rainfall, really arid. They call it the Palm Springs of Washington, and that's when Palm Springs was a shithole. And then you go through like Tri-Cities, and so you have all this, and the it's west to east is the trend of the air. So you have this hot air that's coming. So if we're at 850 feet, and then 19 clicks away is the top of Lewis Peak. So we basically have from 850 feet to 6,500 feet within 19 clicks. So it might be a little further than that, but that is a very big ramp that happens very quickly.
Yeah.
And so all that hot air hits, and it goes straight up these blues. And that's why, like the top of the blues right there, you can see the ponderosa pines. Those are 24 inches of rainfall. We're at about 7 here. So every click you go, you get another inch of rainfall. And so that's why some of the best wheat land is right up there. You can barely see it just at the base of the blues, because no one has to irrigate it. It gets like, 13 or 14 inches of rainfall, so it's self-irrigated, and it's just incredible.
And what's growing because I noticed on the drive here is that vineyards that are...
No, it's a lot of wheat land. Like all the farmers have realized that that's like owning, gold, because you don't have to irrigate it. You get the most bushels of wheat per acre in anywhere in the state, probably in the nation, because it's just the perfect amount of rainfall, perfect soil for it. So and it's Ag 180s, so you can't really split them up. So it would take, number one, finding a spot like that, and then a very big fish to come in and buy.
Because you have to buy 180 acres.
160 acres, then develop it. And I'm sure there's, tons of stipulations in terms of water and other things. And the Blue Mountain Foundation, or whatever the hell it is, that doesn't want you doing anything up there. It's basically very, but anyway, so all the snow, all the rain would form up there. And then when it would melt, there'd be periods of floods. And so for the past, since, that Missoula flood, since those Missoula floods 60,000 years ago-ish, it's basically before the advent of flood control up the Walla Walla. There'd basically be all the snow melt, and there'd be floods coming down here. And so these rocks would just roll down. That's why all the rocks that you see are all rounded. So basically the rocks just roll down the hill as snow melt happens, as floods happen. It's amazing when you think about 60,000 years of floods. Say you had, 6 every 10 years, then you'd have 60 every 100 years, and then you'd have 600 every 1,000 years, and then you'd have 6,000 every, and it goes on and on and on, right? And so there's a lot of water.
We're not that good at math on this podcast, Sean.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a lot of floods.
Yeah, a lot of floods. And so when you think of it that way, so we have, so it would just hit the mouth of the river and then it'd splay out. So as we look to the south east, that's the general trend. You can kind of see it kind of comes up. So it's basically the mouth of the river, all the rocks just piled up and piled up. So it makes kind of a half circle all the way around. And that's what the Rocks District is. All this. And so we have, 360 feet, the drill logs say, of river rock right here. And all you have to do is dig down. And, it just, you see different layers of just literally rounded rocks. Some are bigger, some are smaller, depending on the floods that came down.
Right, the bigger flood pushed the bigger rock.
Exactly. Right. But it is all just rock. And I should send you some pictures, because when you dig up for these wind machines, you have to basically dig a massive hole. Right. And it's just layers and layers and layers of this incredible, stone. And so that is the AVA of the rocks. And that's kind of an interesting side of it. Like very few AVAs have, that geological feature where this is like when Kevin Pogue was forming the petition for this AVA. Everybody wants an AVA. They want to say, oh, look how different this is. Well, this one is defined geologically. It's literally, if there's a rock, if the floods came to this level, you dig holes, find the rock, find where it wasn't rocky, and then draw the line. Right. The Walla Walla AVA is you fill it up to 2,000 feet, and that's the AVA. So is that special? Yes. But is it as, terroir driven as the rocks? No. And so, when asking yourself, what makes that AVA, is it, marketing, or is it like a geologic reason? It's kind of what you look for.
Right. Well, talk about growing out here a little bit, because from the perspective of somebody who lives in dry California, it's pretty lush and green, and it's beautiful. The creeks are always flowing. Even when I was here in July, there was water in the little creeks in the north or the east and west fork of the Walla Walla River, but you're only getting 7 inches of rain. So obviously, the soil, the moisture, the water is coming from those blue mountains, and that's how you tap into it. Do you have wells? That's the whole thing.
So I think it goes back to, what a beautiful spot Walla Walla is. I grew up on the west side in the asshole of Seattle, which is Tacoma. And and I always thought Eastern Washington was kind of a dry shithole. And man, I was wrong. I love it out here, especially in Walla Walla. You can imagine the first settlers or First Nations just, if you have all that rainfall, you have all that timber, you have all of all the food up in the hills. Right. You grow everything that you want here, and all the rivers are constantly flowing because you have 6,500 feet of vert, and something's always melting and always coming down. So you kind of have those. You're stuck in this nice little, perfect, area where you can have areas that have less rainfall, more rainfall as you go closer to the blues. Right. And then you have all the timber, you have everything for building. And so it's a kind of a little oasis tucked up against the mountains. So I've really fallen in love with it. Plus there's not too many people, which I like, but growing is definitely had its challenges. I wasted a lot of money when I first started. Thank God I was working for other people and wasting their money rather than mine. But you get you'll learn quickly, right? After you learn quickly. Otherwise, you die. One way that that we've learned to, we are on a flatland, so the rocks is you go up the hill and there's no rocks because we had no uplift during this time. It's just all river rock that's rolled down a hill.
So when you're talking, we're looking, it's maybe a mile or two away.
Yeah.
And vineyards that are on the hillside.
Yeah. So that's Seven Hills.
That's Seven Hills. Okay.
Seven Hills and Sylvain. And they've really developed that. And that's, at the top of the hills, it's all basalt. And it's really, and as you come down the hill, it's more of the floods, sediment. So it gets thicker and thicker and thicker. So you can actually see that big scarp mark that would have been cut by water. Okay. And so that would have literally been where the rocks are on the flat and then the hillside. So, the French and the Italians, you are on the flatland, you are an idiot, is usually, which is right, usually, the truth. Right. But it is also where this rock is. So the higher elevation sites, they don't have, and up until this year, which this year I've never seen it since since I've been making wine in 2004. I haven't seen, usually the warm air is up above and it flows like water, so the cold air comes down, and we're in the flatlands. So when you're in the flatlands, you have to get creative. And what we've done is we basically keep our, it's like kind of a hybrid goblet, where you keep this really low-lying head, and we bury it and unbury it every year. We kind of use this pitchfork. We're 8x3 spacing, so there's 1,815 plants per acre, it's kind of tighter. I'd like to go a little tighter, but
when you replant.
Yeah, hopefully we never replant, touch wood, jeez. But so we kind of have a pitchfork that's going to the sky. If we have a bad year, and so bad years would be hard freezes during the winter. When you think of Rhone varietals, you think about where they were planted. It's like south of Spain, south of France. They haven't seen -5 degrees ever. Right. So you come over and you plant it. So you have to get kind of creative.
And it'll get that cold here.
It got to -13 the first week of January this year. And so basically all those higher up elevation sites all got whacked. We were a little lucky here. We had some insulation. It was the first time it had ever happened where we had this little fog layer here, and it protected us. And then you could see every star in the constellation above it. And it got to -13, and unless you're Riesling or Gewurz, or a varietal that's from Germany or Austria or something like that, you got whacked. And so, and Mother Nature will do that to you. The second you think you know it all is the second you're screwed. You've been too cocky at a party and you said, "Oh, that'll never happen to me," and she hears it and she squashes you like
whacks you.
Yeah.
So do they do the burial cans and stuff up on the Seven Hills, or they?
No, they I think you think that if it hasn't happened, before. So now they've got some real issues, and I don't know how they're going to mitigate those, because once you start something so high and you have no propagation from the bottom, nothing's pushing from the bottom.
Right.
So there are ways of cutting it off and then, scarring the cambium and seeing if it can kind of come up. But that takes time. And it is expensive to bury heads and unbury them, but it basically is a self-insuring side of things. And I don't know if you guys are insurance agents, but, insurance agents will come in and say, "Oh, if only you had checked, box 738-12, otherwise we would cover you. But, because you didn't, you're screwed, and, you can't even find that box when you look for your policy.
That box doesn't actually exist.
It doesn't exist. And so when it is expensive, but what's more expensive is losing a crop every year. Right. And also, so we can control it, right?
All right, so we're sitting here, we're looking at these vines. There's little sort of Neptune's trident sticking out of the ground. Yeah. There's, bud break happened, you said, about a couple of weeks ago. There's a little vine growth. How far up those arms, I guess, do you bury? Or do you go over the top of them?
No, so right where the drip tube is, you can kind of see a head.
Okay.
So right below that drip tube, and you can see that we're keeping 3 or 4 positions, and we'll kind of cut those back because we want to propagate those growth for later years. Oh. So you can kind of see.
So there's new arms coming up, or the potential for new arms coming up all the time.
So we'll cut those back to 2 buds, and we'll constantly do that throughout the year.
Okay.
Just so we keep that position. And then when we bury, that's kind of like our next year's, if we freeze out, we can...
You'll have at least a can or 2.
Exactly. So when we go over to the Grenache, doesn't like the cold. So at the beginning of the season, you're looking at the buds, seeing what percentage of damage you have. And a partial damage within a vine is worse than... it's just horrible having partial damage and, acting like you had no damage, because you'll get inconsistencies. So with Grenache, I just knew that I was going to cut it all back. So when you see the Grenache, basically we cut off that trident right to the the head, and that head is always buried. And so it's just a really there's a couple different things. Number one, you're closer to the soil, and the idea is the more power just coming from the soil. So hopefully, I've worked with, and he's become a good friend, is Claude Gros. He's out of France. He's called the Chameleon. And basically, he was the one that really helped me come up with a system of, he wants everything coming to the sky. right? Everything growing, straight up. So we take everything off to the sides, which really helps congestion because we are 3 feet apart. And we really are, the idea is the power of, the terroir can shine if it doesn't, or become more powerful the closer it is to the ground. And so it's a pain in the ass to farm.
So I'm looking. Your fruit zone is that second wire between the second and third.
It is
okay.
The drip tube and the first wire that you see.
Okay. Oh, the first. That's the fruit zone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, you'll see that we like those inside. So
that's low.
It is. With 8x3 spacing, we need about, with a Syrah, it's about eight clusters per plant, and we get about 2.5 tons per acre. And so that's all dependent on cluster size and cluster weight. Grenache is just so big that it's like 6 clusters to get about that. And so so we get to kind of cherry pick our fruit zone and make sure that everything's uniform. And that's 90% of the work goes in the vineyard, I'm sure. Yeah. A lot of people will agree. And so that's, and then we become more stewards of the wine. Basically, we're janitors of what we're brought in. And so I don't know how the Californians made and the French made being a janitor exclusive.
Cover of magazines.
Yeah, that's right. It's like
the best winery janitor of the year.
Yeah.
And so this is all Grenache and Syrah here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 different clones. We actually have them right here. So for the wine geeks, we made kind of a tabless clone. Love Rocks, basically. We just do 200 cases just so we can see the differences between here. This is actually, yeah, so that's tabs and this is 470. So basically 2 different clones off of, so 470 is about 2/3 of the way down. And then tabless Create clone is the other kind of half of the Syrah, and then it's 7.5 acres of Grenache. And so the Grenache is this big G right here.
I probably should.
Oh, it does. It's all good.
Yeah. And when did you plant the vineyard?
So I couldn't afford to plant it all. Oh, that's the other thing. So this was an orchard, for the 60 years before I owned it. And, so you have all these, you have all these apples falling. And so, you actually have biodiversity within the soil because apples fall every year, they get reincorporated. And so really the top layer.
So you have some dirt out here.
Yeah, you still have that kind of that nice layer of dirt. And so the first couple of years, the Syrah was just vigorous. It was just so happy. But it's, it's different. Sometimes you taste stuff that was, in a wheatland with everything that is just like the soil's totally dead. So it really takes amending it. And Milton Freewater definitely was hit hard with not changing out their apples, varietals. They had Red Delicious in here until, just recently. And you couldn't make it. It costs more sometimes to pick than it does. Yeah. So, that's been, that's been really helpful in terms of the vineyard. But, and Grenache or Syrah is so floppy. Like it needs to have.
It needs that structure.
It needs some type of structure. And then the Grenache just wants to go straight up. Like I love growing Grenache because it just goes straight to the sky, kind of has nice, strong, it's kind of self-supportive, whereas, floppy Syrah is just flops all over the place and, grows. And I don't think you can head train Grenache or Syrah here.
I don't know if we do a lot of head train in Sonoma of Zinfandel and Grenache and all the Syrahs on trellis.
Yeah.
It basically has to be.
Flops.
Yeah. Well, it needs the structure.
Yeah.
But the wines taste like that too. Syrah that doesn't have structure. Those floppy vines make floppy wines.
Floppy wines. There you go. You started a new winery.
Floppy wines.
Floppy wines.
I mean, you dig a hole out here, or you take a walk in one of these vineyards, and it seems like you should be growing Grenache, right? I mean, based on those rocks.
Yeah, I think Syrah does a great job of.
But then that's the thing, is Syrah, that's what everybody, the rocks is known.
Yeah, well, I think
for
Syrah
Syrah,
does a
right?
good job of helping you understand the terroir. It kind of it gives you different expressions, more so than say like a cab. Like you can have a cab grown here and a cab in Red Mountain. I don't know if you're going to be able to say, oh, look at that terroir. You know, you might have higher acidity, higher fruit, but I think the terroir really, like, I think Syrah does a great job of that. So it's a great way of understanding it. Like you grow Syrah in basalt and it tastes totally different than, stones here. And same with Grenache in a way. So I think that's kind of the fun part about Syrah. And it's also, I mean, you get, with these Syrahs, you get this more all tapenade. We call it the rock spunk. You know, all tapenade, more savory, right? So it's not this really fruity, monster. It's more
The olive and the coffee grounds thing that for me, when I smell rock Syrah, and, had the opportunity now, especially, and hopefully more over the next few days, tasting rock Syrahs from all over different producers. I don't think it matters how you make it, if it's, the SJR peddler that's 100% whole cluster, things that are more tradition, you stick your nose in that glass and it's rock Syrah.
Yeah. And that's what terroir is, right? It's being able to try, this, the guy down the street, the other guy down the street, and we might not all be the same, but there's that fingerprint. And so for wine geeks, that's what you're looking for, that where you can stick your nose in it and say, oh, wow, I know exactly where that came from. And very few spots can you do that with. And so, we're young in Washington State. I know a couple second generation, farmers are great, are growers and winemakers. But, in California, you've got 4 generations. In France, you have, 30 or 15th. And in Italy, with Antinori's, you got like 32,
Yep.
So they've made those mistakes. They've understood, they've had time to understand, where to grow. The geology in Washington's a little bit boring. It takes you about 4 hours to get to anywhere that's really, really cool. So finding like, because it's, windblown loess, flood deposits, riverbeds, and basalt, it's, so in different variations. But there's also some other areas that we're just starting to get into that we'll talk about at the next podcast when we release those.
So where are you getting the white grapes?
So the white, so within the rocks, it's very high pH, right? High pH, so or high pH produces higher pH wines. TAs are still there, but we have very high potassium,
And that's just what's naturally occurring.
Just naturally occurring. So it's the opposite of Paso. In Paso, you have to wait a long time before your acids drop. If you don't wait for that, you're just drinking like a Sour Patch Kid, with so much acid, right? But it's beautiful when it hits, right? And then you get that balance. So here, we have to be very on top of it on when we are picking, because, there's a fine line between dropping too much acid. So what we'll do is we've got a lot of Syrah here, so we'll do a first pass, and that's kind of the bright, fresh stuff with more acid. That's usually 45 days after veraison. Then another 10 days, a week to 10 days, we'll have a second pass, and that's more kind of mid. And then,
sorry, it's funny.
oh, that's awesome. Are they out?
Yeah, they're walking down right there.
Oh, it's so cool.
Also, there was this really old forklift driving down the road a second ago.
That's my forklift.
That's
They're
your
coming.
forklift?
Yeah,
I love that forklift. That's a great
Yeah.
forklift.
Yeah, I need a forklift that just stays outside forever. Yeah.
This is that patina of rust.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank God that thing still works. Sometimes the throttle gets stuck and you just hear, you're just wondering why a tank of propane only lasts you like 4 hours. Yeah.
Burning it all. Then you're talking about your Syrah pick. Sorry.
No, it's all right. And so then we'll have a later pick. The last pick is usually what we do all the extended macerations with. And so then when we're blending back, we can have this fun side of things where we can have, some acid, some freshness with these really kind of combined with kind of these later picks where you just have a lot of this concentration and depth. And so that's pretty much how we're making wines out of these sites.
Well, Syrah is something that is a high pH grape anyway.
Yeah, it can be, but nothing like, usually we're trying to stay under 4, and we try everything in our power to stay under 4.
Yeah.
And we don't add water, we don't add tartaric. We're trying to get, unless we really mess up, in which case, we shouldn't be making wine anyway. But you're trying to, do everything you possibly can in terms of shade, in terms of, crop management, on how to, bring more acid into these wines.
So, what bricks do you end up picking these things at? Because it's not like you're...
It's not super high. It's like 24.5. Right. It's usually the max for Syrah, and about 23.5, 24 for Grenache. Yeah. This is probably, there's a lot hotter sites in Washington State. And, Grenache is a much later ripener. It's like Grenache, then it's Mourvedre, and then, or even later than Cab in a lot of times. But I really like the expression of Syrah and Grenache here. It's just this prettier, lighter, fresher side of it. It's not this tar, tobacco, Maduro, where you kind of drink a glass and you think, wow, that's sandpaper.
No, the Syrah especially, it's elegant. And even we're sort of used to Syrah being pretty big around us. And then the Grenache can be a little more on the elegant side, but you have a lot of depth on your Grenache, and then that Syrah has this elegance to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the whites. I guess you were asking about the whites.
Where the white grape?
Totally segued into.
It's all good. No,
So
you're on brand.
So
on brand shop.
so we're there's this so higher elevation sites do whites really well. So when I first planted this, I think it was 2011. I did the first 8 acres of Syrah, and I put in all those short rows of Viognier, and I was like, I want to plant that, and I'm going to co-ferment. And unfortunately, I didn't think about it that Viognier ripens 3 weeks beforehand, and so it was I call it my $50,000 mistake, and I've got a lot of those. So, but I pull the whites off, but it's a kind of a higher pH white that I'm not like thrilled with. Like I prefer higher elevation sites, much cooler, and just really get that. What you're ideally looking for with any of these varietals, is finding the right place to plant, having the longest possible hang time without it getting overripe. And so higher elevation sites. So there's a site that's 1350 that an old farmer named Dave Jones has. And we should get a podcast with him because he's probably 80 or 75. He's probably going to kill me for saying that. But, he's seen it all. Yeah. He's seen Walla Walla when the whorehouses were around, and his dad would after church, they'd go and bail everybody out of jail and get back to the. It would be. We should do it. Yeah, I want to get him. I want to call him up right now.
We're here till Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, we need to get a mic. Yeah, we need to get a mic on him. Oh,
that is one of the things I would love to know more about. Sort of the
history.
The history, especially so I came out of Pasco yesterday, and I didn't want to be on the freeway. So as soon as I saw that old Highway 12, that's the thing. Other thing for our listeners back in Sonoma, Highway 12, which is our highway, also runs right through Walla Walla. So we got love. There's this sort of like sister city thing happening. But I went through old Highway 12 all the way into town, and one of the things that I love to see agricultural diversity. The horses, the hay, the cows, the apples, the blueberries, the grapes, sort of all coexisting. And I don't know. I'm sure that in real life there's tensions between everybody, water and the whole thing. But
it's this perfect, peaceful utopia.
Totally, right?
Wrong.
But from the outside, it looks, it's this sort of like bucolic, beautiful agricultural place. The wheat fields, the whole thing. So I would love to talk to somebody like that and sort of like dig into that transition to when, because now in Sonoma, it's grapes, right? The apples of Sebastopol are pretty much all gone. It's all Pinot Noir.
Right.
you know, there's still some dairy left, but you know, it's pretty much grapes and dairy.
Well, I mean, and thinking about it, like, you know, there was 3 wineries here, you know, at the in 2000, right? You know, or maybe a little bit before, yeah. And so it's like I almost said that, but I thought that might be. So yeah, because it kind of is the turn of the century. The turn of the century.
25 years ago, man.
Yeah, and so it wasn't that long ago. And then you know you hear about Walla Walla being boarded up in the 90s, and they're not knowing what what's going on, and then there's definitely been a resurgence. And so talking to there's some people that are like, oh, the damn wineries are all coming in. You know, I'm sure that's the same way there was in Sonoma, but in the end, change is usually good. And you either adapt or die. And a lot of the farmers around here are my friends. So, and it's...
Because at the end of the day, you're all farmers.
We're farmers, and we need... I wasn't born a farmer, so I need the most help. And so it's so important to listen to people that know a hell of a lot more about it. That it doesn't matter if you're making wine or farming or anything else, or accounting or legal advice or everything else.
Yeah, totally.
You want the best of the best that you're talking to.
Was it Christophe was the first one out here?
Yeah, I think you'll have to talk to him about it because he's got some funny stories. But basically, the rumor has it he was on his way to the Willamette, and he ran into a buddy, and he said that I think they said I want to I'm looking for a place with a lot of rocks or stones, and sounds like he came out here, and there was just he said it reminded him of Chateauneuf, but I'll let him tell the story because I don't really need to be the one telling his story.
Well, we're trying to track him down.
Yeah.
I mean, you come for Hospice du Rhone, and it's a lot of demands of everybody's time around here for sure.
Yeah.
So, it's good.
It's great that you guys are up here. I mean, I kind of prefer going down to Paso and just taking the flight down,
right?
Eating and drinking and enjoying life, and then flying back home with a massive hangover, which is usually how it works.
There's some Paso guys who are here who they're not pouring in the grand tasting. They're not doing it. They just came literally for the eating and the drinking and to have a good time and then fly home.
Well, it's probably a release for them because it takes so much to put these things on. It's impressive.
I know, and to do it, when you're used to doing it every other year at Paso Robles, and everyone, the rental companies know you know what buildings you're using, and then to come up here and do it all basically from scratch this year, I'm sure was a big
ask,
job for Vicky and Howard and Aaron and her whole team. So
yeah,
we're still kind of curious. We have no idea where anything is really taking place because we're used to being down at the fairgrounds in Paso, and so you guys don't really have a big event center or anything.
Yeah, they've been doing it at what's called the Ford Motor Company, which is this it's a smaller venue than anything that you guys had a perfect space for it. But it'll be interesting to see because this is what, Wednesday, or is it Thursday? It's Thursday. So where were you guys? I didn't go to any events yesterday. Where were you guys?
We were just at a private
we went to
party.
A private party.
Well, that was it.
We had some friends who went to the Paso.
Oh, that's right, the
Paso showcase.
Where was that? That was
at the Motor Company, I believe, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's right downtown.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we're staying right downtown. We rented a car mostly so we could drive out here. But everything else, walking around downtown, 15 minutes in any direction is everything you need, right?
Yeah. Well, 15 minutes. I think it's more like don't blink and
Well, I'm walking. I'm a slow walker.
Yeah.
I got short legs. I like to take it all in.
Yeah, because that's
stop and smell the rest.
Sam was picking up the rear last night.
Yeah, leading from behind. Leading from behind. How did you get into wine, Sean?
Oh,
you grew up on Tacoma.
A lot of people.
You're a geologist.
Yeah. So
where does wine on your family table or?
Yeah. So my mom was French Canadian. My dad's Irish, and there was always wine on the table. They worked hard, and then at night they would have their friends over, and there's always wine on the table. So I think I associated wine with food and friends and laughter, and I was like, "What the hell is that?" Makes that work out. And my grandfather was a oil and gas geologist in actually Libya for a while, and his whole family was with him. And I guess Gaddafi took over, and he said, "Listen, I want nothing to do with this." So he moved my grandmother and my mom over to, and her sisters and brothers to a small little spot in the south of France, so he could just take a puddle jumper over. And so as a kid, we would go back every summer, and with the cousins running around some small French, walled village. They'd all be working on the house or helping my grandparents out, and the kids' whole job was to like go get the wine, go get the cheese, go get the bread that were all in order. And so, it was like, don't eat the bread, don't smash the cheese, and don't drink the wine, or don't break it. Right. And so, anyway, so we were around wine a lot. And then as I got older, definitely, it was Trader Joe's. I won't buy anything more than $3.99. And then it was, all right, I don't want to buy anything more than $5.99. And then it was $11.99. And then pretty soon you're like, well, what does that taste like? I wonder what that's like. And then with in the oil and gas side of things and expense reports, they started to like really kind of, whoa, I want to try that. I want to try this. And so I think at first in college, it was definitely Zins. I needed something that was going to hit me over the head with a 2x4 flavor, which is pretty much a Zin. You just like, raw, you get the whole like sensory wheel in a Zin, or you can. And then, then it probably moved to the complete opposite, which is like Pinot. So, and then I started collecting it, and, when you start collecting, you're like, oh, I need a case of that. Oh, I need a case of that. And then it's like, actually, I need 6 bottles of something better. And then it's like, well, I can't really afford, I'll have to get 3 bottles of that. And then, your price then you kind of ruin your palate in terms of, it gets more, and then it becomes, yeah. And so then on the oil and gas side, I'd worked, I like the bigger jobs. I like the ones where you're gone for 6 months, and really, they were always paid more, and you're always, like, we were always in, like, some spot of, I always pick the ones in Louisiana because I love Louisiana. I love the food, I love the cuisine, and we'd usually get yelled at by, we were a sub off of, like, oil and gas exploration, and so my job was basically to get yelled at by homeowners associations and sheriff's departments and tell them that the explosions that were going in the ground weren't taking out water wells and all the other stuff. And so at the end of the day, after, talking to everybody or getting yelled at, I'd think about it, and I'd have a smile on my face because I was thinking about the Chateauneuf I was going to drink, when I got home with a big steak or something like that. And so, it was just like one of those things that I like food and wine, and they pair perfectly. So I think that's how and I never thought I'd ever end up making wine or going into this field. I was going to outlive a 2-year non-compete. If I was going to start my own company within the same field, I was funded by one of the top dogs that was always hiring me. And then we went to a lawyer, and they basically said, if you do that, you're going to, they're going to sue you, and you're going to be broke, and they're going to take all the money. And so I go do something for 2 years, and somehow I convinced my wife to move out to Walla Walla, and I started cleaning tanks for a guy named Rich Funk that had 3 wineries that were under his house. And
wait, what?
3 wineries. So basically, the way wineries have grown here is that you have one host winery, and so that host winery will try and pay their rent by having 3 other wineries that are tenants. Basically, I call them the gutter dogs. So they're just trying to starting their brand, and then as they start their brand, they, the host winery is basically like, God, I want to get these guys out of here. And so after about 5 years, like usually one of them's gone bankrupt, the other one's built another massive facility, or 2 of them have. And so that's kind of how it worked out here. Then you have one winemaker that's like, never punch down like that. Always do it this way. And the other guy's like, oh my God, never do that. That's just what idiots do. And so when you're a total sponge, and I was happy to be around my kids and in project management by trade, right? And so I love big projects. And so someone had their foot on the accelerator with cash, and they said, that we in 2004, 2005, 2006, from 2004 when I moved here, there was maybe 12 different wineries, and you fast forward to 2008, I think there was 130.
Oh my God.
So
fast.
Yeah, there's a lack of people, to do the work, and I was happy.
Like cellar help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sell everything.
Right. Everything.
Like, how do you build a winery? I was like, well, I can help you be the GC on that. And then all my friends are usually the concrete guys, the electrician, the plumbers, anyway. Right. And so once you're in with them, like my friends all built this for me, and I had to pay them.
Right.
They're not that good of friends, but the architect, he donated his time for this project too. I mean. So anyway, so I think, then it was, well, you did well with that. Can you plant a vineyard? And I was like, hell yeah, I can plant a vineyard. And that was the dumbest thing I've ever said. I was like, that was when you waste a lot of money.
How do you plant a vineyard too in rocks? Like, what's different than planting in whatever medium we would do at home? Because it's kind of weird.
We have rocks, but it's a different kind of rock, right?
But anyone that's dug a hole at the beach, right? You're basically pushing the sand out, but then it all wants to just come back down in the hole, right? So how do you?
Well, so first off, we have dormant vines, and so dormant vines have been sitting in a greenhouse for 18 months. Now we're having to use. On different rootstock but before it was own rooted. So with dormant vines.
Well, there was the thought that phylloxera wouldn't grow here. Right?
Yeah. Wrong. Wrong. So now, everything here is own rooted. We haven't seen phylloxera here, but it's only a matter of time. Luckily, it's really well draining soil, so we're hoping that the populations won't grow too much, but everything else. So I've got 7 acres, about 1 click or half a click that way, another click down here. I've got another 6 acres, and I'm just planting another one. So on the 2 new ones that I planted.
We saw some people out pulling the irrigation hose this morning. Was that coming down the road?
No. Okay. We can drive by them, but the 13 acres that I've just planted 2 years ago, all Grenache on all different, 3 different types of rootstock. And then the Syrah that I just planted this year, the idea is if phylloxera does come, well, when it does, it will come, right? It's not a matter of when or if, it's when. You'll start to see that kind of degradation within 4 or 5 years. So here I've got 13 acres that'll be coming up, and then it won't hit the whole vineyard at once. It'll hit sections, and so I'll knock out 4 acres, supplant with some of those other, and that's the general idea. And then eventually you move through it.
Right.
What were we talking about before that?
Well, I was just wondering how you actually get.
How do you actually get
it in?
Oh, I mean, now I'm going to talk about it, and all the jackasses around us are going to know how to do it. But anyway, I guess that's
only if they listen. And
yeah, no one's going to listen. That's good.
Bart's mom, who's not here, she's the only listener anyway.
So we basically, you basically have these dormant vines. You trim all the roots, and then you use a spike, and in that spike you have exactly the depth. And so you basically weld a foot plate to that spike, and so then you just literally put it down and then move it around in a circle, right? And then you take it out, and then so it's actually pretty easy because all the rocks move to the side, and then you put your dormant vine in, and then you move it in with a little sawdust that you've sprinkled all along, and then you water it. And so as long as your dormant vines are, alive and happy, so it's not that bad. Usually we put on all the trellis systems before, but we kind of got it down to a science after, doing it the wrong way. I can tell you the wrong way to do it. Yeah.
I want another wrong way too.
Yeah.
I mean, all the mistakes.
I'm a pro at that,
Yeah.
but it's actually, it works out.
Do you rip out here? You got to rip out here, right? Break it all up.
Yeah.
How far down do you go? About 6 feet?
Yeah, it's just whatever those tines on a D9 are.
Yeah.
It's probably 3 feet. That was just really just to break it all up and get any of the root structures that were down there. And then, luckily, this was an orchard before, but we don't use any pesticides or herbicides. So basically, everything is done with underneath.
What would you
Basically,
use them for anyway?
well, you could have like a cover crop, or things like that. Yeah, and so we have weeds that come out here, but we'll just use springtooths and knives just to eradicate the weeds.
And how often do you have to turn on the irrigation?
With this vineyard last year we did it once. So as it gets old, really the drip system is there for like 1 year. Man, I think it was 21. We had 60-mile-an-hour winds with 110-degree weather.
Oof.
And it happened. Like usually you never have winds, and so it was like a flamethrower. Yeah. And that's when you need your, that's like, holy shit, we're gonna have some serious dehydration. But other than that, like last year was perfect. I think now that this is established, it's the younger vines that need all the water that you can possibly take. Like we want them to struggle, right? Especially with Syrah, like I don't want more growth. I mean, these things are so floppy. I want them to be so stressed that they can barely grow, because they're going to grow like,
It grows no matter what.
Yeah. Same with Grenache. And Grenache, if you can, you don't want like bull canes, and you don't want this massive growth. So you're trying to, I don't want to water them. So it's really just, extended periods of, extreme heat, is what I would worry about, where you're worried about your shading. Because basically, eastern exposure, you open up everything for airflow, and then you make your selections on the eastern side. On the western side, you leave everything covered, because the afternoon sun is just brutal, the morning sun. So much like this building, I told the architect that, and he was like, "Oh, I've got your building for you." So everything's protected by
Right, this
the
opening
evening.
goes way out further on this side, huh?
Exactly. And so the morning sun is really nice and easy, and that's, where you want airflow through the vines. You don't want
Canopy management
Canopy management.
Yeah, that's right.
in your building.
Yeah, totally.
That's right.
Yep.
Man, you just learned everything about me. I feel shallow now. I don't know what to say.
We got
Wait till we start putting in our vineyard next door.
Good. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It looks like an empty field right there.
Yeah.
We call Phil.
We don't need more problems. I mean, and that's the thing is like, this vine management here is a completely different animal than in Sonoma. With those temperature extremes, those vines close to the ground, you come up here with 40, 50 years of expertise in Sonoma, and it's basically, some of it applies, but a lot of it doesn't.
Well, you guys would figure it out.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, you'd figure it out. I think it's everywhere is different though, right? And it's just learning.
But are you covered in snow part of the year?
Hopefully, it's every 3 or 4 years we get a nice big dump. We're so far north that we get our diurnal shift through that. So we'll be, usually 95%. I think it's right there. As we're 95%, we're 90 degrees usually during the summers, and then at night it drops 50 degrees. So we're 95, 45, and that's just by how far north we are with latitude, right? You guys get it from, the Pacific Ocean cooling down. Yeah. And we get it just how far north we are. So there's advantages and disadvantages of that, right? We're on the extreme temperature side of things, where we can get too cold, and then we have frost issues and freeze issues. But
it's also an extreme growing season, right? I remember when I was here last, it was early July, first, second week of July. And I remember sitting in my, in the tower of the Whitman Hotel.
And Kevin Pogue was talking.
Yeah. No, it was the sunrise was like 4 a.m.
Right.
And it didn't set until 8 or 9, 9
right.
or 10 because of how far north we are. So you get all that sun during the day pushing that growth during the peak of the season,
That's very true.
sort of like balances out those other sides, I guess. I don't know.
Well, and we have seasons. Like sometimes you go down to California, you're like, are you spraying those to go dormant because they just want to grow, you know? And so
we get those weird November growths on the end of vines.
yeah,
Where everything's picked out. You get a little rain, and then the sun comes out, and especially like out in Carneros and stuff, you go out there and you'll be driving through. It'll be November, and there'll be green leaves that have grown off the end of the canes before they've been pruned.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Do you actually work here during like the weekends and stuff?
Do I work here?
What is this? You hear pouring the
my
wine?
Banker? What is it you actually think you do here?
I mean, if people come here, they come talk to you. You're actually pouring the wines, or you?
No, I've got a wife and 3 kids, and so actually one of the kids I got 2 kids now. One's in Cal Poly, and so she's loving it down there. And I'm gonna hit up a bunch of wineries that are down there because she's good at washing glasses.
Solid second generation of winemakers kids at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joel Gott's kid is there. Charles Beeler's kid is there. Like all starting this year.
Oh, I mean, I love it down there. It's like I remember going for a walk at the ag department, and there's like all the parts of the tractor are zip tied and like inventoried. And you're like, holy shit, they're taking apart a tractor and putting it back together. Like, I want to go here.
With a blindfold.
With the blindfold.
Do you have a diesel department?
Full metal jacket style.
My tractor is my friend.
Yes. This is my tractor. There are many like it, but this one is mine.
So you got to do it in Spanish.
Exactly. This is mi tractor. That's all I got.
We'll edit that.
I'm muchos.
You'll work that one. You're a genius.
We're drinking wine. I can speak French. If we were drinking tequila, I'd be able to speak more Spanish. Well, tell us a little bit about Rotie Cellars, sort of in general, the experience here, the wines you make, wine club, where people can find it out in the world.
We're 100% direct to consumer.
100%.
Yeah, well, we 5 years ago I stopped distribution just because I'm so much better at spending the distributors' money than they are. So we usually throw big parties for our wine club. We have basically our core wines. What you're trying here, well, our Southern White, Southern Red, Northern Red is our spring allocation. That's what was just come out. We asked for a 6-bottle commitment, spring and fall, and then we bring out, and then we, in the fall, we have Little G, which is 100% Grenache from a site right off the Columbia River. Then Dre, which is 100% Mourvèdre from Wallula, which is like one of the greatest places to grow Mourvèdre. And then
we might have to try that before we leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we do other things throughout the year that aren't part of the wine club. They're just kind of wine club members. So we have a tasting room in Soto, in Seattle, with Southern Downtown, and then we have the fishbowl here on the vineyard. And so, yeah, come find us. Order online.
Yeah. You still have the tasting room in downtown Walla Walla, or is that? Was that always like a different brand?
Yeah. So Kevin Masterman, he's actually my buddy that's helps me make all the wine, and Jesse, which I think is on the forklift out there offloading a bunch of cases. They helped me make it all, but Kevin has started House of Bones, which is a basically a Burgundy project. So we're making Chard from Celilo, which is a vineyard near Hood River, and so really bright, crisp, acid-driven Chard and a Pinot from Oregon.
And that's the downtown experience.
Yeah, that's the downtown experience. Yeah.
So, Rotie Cellars. Why'd you call it Rotie Cellars? I mean, you were coat Rotie in it. I
loved, I really wanted to focus on Rhone varietals when I first started, and I was super naive and young and dumb. And so I thought that would be we weren't coat Rotie. We were Rotie Cellars. We were trying to, emulate Rhone varietals, strong, big Syrahs, and all Rhone, but in Washington State. And I had a really good trademark attorney. So he said, "Don't export it."
Don't export it. That is the key.
Yeah.
How much wine do you guys make?
We make about, for Rotie, about 12,000 cases annually. Yeah. It's definitely, at some part, I was like, I'll never be over 3,000. I'll never be over 3,000. And then it was, I'll never be over 5,000. I'll never be over 5,000. Then it's, yeah. And then, you get more vineyards, and then and so we're probably going to be pretty, I like where we're at right now. Like, if you start to get too much bigger, then it adds a whole nother layer. And I think we've got some good ideas on what's next, but we'll save that for the next time.
Cool. Yeah, the wines are beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Happy to be back here tasting these wines.
Yeah, you guys aren't spitting much. That's good. It's a good sign.
I know. We're going to spend some time down here in the rocks, I think.
And I'm driving now.
Sober up before we... No, they're all... There's an elegance. There's that signature of the rocks. It's really, when we were here in 2022, Elaine was moderating and did this keynote, Haka Waka Waka, for those who don't know. And her thesis is that basically there is no AVA in America that has established itself as a Syrah AVA the way that the Rocks District has, and the singularity of these wines, the way that the terroir comes through, and it comes through in the Grenache too.
I feel like in the Grenache even more.
Yeah.
I mean, or maybe I'm just drinking more Grenache.
No, I absolutely love the Grenache. It's my favorite wine we make, just because of, I love that savory side of Grenache, and it kind of gives you this edge. You still have that salinity, yet you have this purity of fruit. And so I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
So, but thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us down.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Thanks
Anytime.
for you and all your colleagues here in Walla Walla helping Hospice du Rhone happen up here. We're happy to be here.
I love it. We'll see how we do in the bowling alley, or let's get some type of competition going, or karaoke bar. Or
Are you guys pouring at the Grand Tasting?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
Oh, yeah. I hope we are.
Yeah.
I
If
think I
we
gotta
make
be
it
there.
to Saturday, we'll be there.
If they let me in the door, maybe. Well, thanks, guys.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. This has been an episode of the Winemakers Podcast, Hospice du Rhone edition, on the road,
On the road with
on
these funny
location,
mics.
on the rocks.
On the rocks.
The Winemakers on the rocks. So
We
stoned.
got-
Subscribe, review. I don't know when this is coming out, so we don't need to do any shout outs, right? Or is this coming out Friday?
I mean, why not?
Yeah, well, if you're not at Hospice du Rhone, you're missing out. There's definitely events happening at 16600 to look forward to. A few tickets left for our KSVY fundraiser, which is May 2nd.
And I got to meet one of the DJs the other day.
you did?
She works at Gun Bun.
Oh,
Nora?
sweet. Yeah, Nora's
Yeah.
awesome.
And she's going to be spinning records.
Spinning records. And
Yep.
then June 1st is the Moon Mountain District Reach for the Moon tasting.
Yep.
So that's coming soon. Tickets available. We'll be there. And then June 2nd will be our first Vinyl Sunday of the year. And then June 23rd, tickets available
Almost
soon.
June.
Dude, it's right around the corner. Right around the corner.
Yeah.